All right, guys, listen, last Sunday was such an incredible experience because, we served together as a church family at a local elementary school. If you know about it, then we had almost 300 volunteers who were registered to help at FIA, Faith in Action. People who were willing to demonstrate their faith through serving others. It was an incredible experience. I'll tell you, doing something like that, it just makes you feel good, right? It really makes you feel good. But not only that, I'll say this, doing something like that, it also makes you look good, if I'm being honest, right? It makes you look good. And too often, we can allow that to become our focus. In fact, sometimes the motivation to look a certain way can turn our good into something very bad, right? Now, Jesus cautions in this regard. We've been talking about the Sermon on the Mount, and he turns his attention to this very thing as he continues unpacking his standard of righteousness in the kingdom. In Matthew 6, he gives his attention on three basic examples of religious observance. And he gives perspective on what our priority should be in regards to those. Certainly you have people who are doing the right things, but Jesus just kind of raises the standard just a little bit more to help us see what he has in mind. Let's pray, and then we'll dive into Matthew chapter 6. God, thank you so much for just what you're showing us. You're showing us, God, you are inviting us into the more that you have for us, and you are gracing us with everything we need to get there. And we're grateful. We're grateful. We say we won't be settled with what our lives have been, with what our past decisions and choices and what our norm has been in the past. Dear God, we only want what you have for us. So teach us, show us what matters to you, and we'll make that matter to us as well. We love you, dear sir. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Amen. If you have Bibles, go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 6. We're going to start at verse 1 and just read here. Listen to what it says. It says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." Now, I'll pause right there, because what I want you to understand is that most likely Jesus holds in view here a traditional practice of what's called almsgiving, right? Now, alms were simply an expression of sympathy and of care, and they're given in the form of money or goods to those who are in need. It's almsgiving. Maybe you've heard the term before, but what I need you to see is that it's really a framework for welfare, right? Welfare, which simply boils down to providing general needs. And of course, I know that there are tons of thoughts and views and opinions just across the board as it relates to a term, a concept like welfare. But what I want you to see is that whenever you personalize welfare, then it becomes something more. It becomes charity. It becomes charity. Whenever you personalize welfare, whenever you build a relational component into this, what otherwise would just be a transaction, whenever you build that piece into it, then it becomes charity, right? And so Jesus is making a point here. What he's pushing towards is this: private charity is worshipful in a way that public welfare is not. It's not to say that it doesn't have benefit. It's not to say that it doesn't have value, but private charity is worshipful in a way that public welfare is not. Now understand, within the culture, this is what they're pushing for. This is what they're after. It's not enough to meet a person's need. In meeting that need, you must also meet God's expectation, right? You must meet God's expectation. And so the way it worked in those days, guys, is that those who gave alms were automatically viewed as being in right relationship with God. They were pictured and they were seen in a certain light. And the conclusion was the more that they gave, the closer to God they must be, right? You can see how this might have an impact on people. You can see how they might want to do it more and more. And most importantly, you can see how it wouldn't just be enough for them to do it. They will want people to know what they're doing, right? Their actions were viewed as people who were filling the earth with God's love. Right? So they're seen in a certain light in doing this. Now, the reason I share it with you is because I want you to understand that the action itself culturally was normal practice. This is not exceptional. In their context, it's not exceptional. Like, it's exceptional in our context. Like in today's time, because see, we're impressed whenever we see someone helping others rather than being disappointed when we see people only helping themselves. You see the difference there? We're impressed when we see people doing good rather than being disappointed when we see people who are neglecting others. And so what you have is a cultural context in which this manner of those who have relating to those who do not have, it was socially expected. It was the normal thing to do. It's important for you to know that. It's important for you to see that as you kind of measure Jesus' words, because Jesus steps in to teach. He turns on the light, and what he's saying is simply that which y'all call good, this normal practice that you have, this way of relating to those who may not have as much as you do. Listen, he's saying it's not necessarily as good as you think it is. He says, whoa, pump the brakes, y'all. You're patting yourself on the back about a whole bunch of stuff. You're affirming yourself about some things, but let me just kind of give you clarity. It's not necessarily as good as you think it is. And understand this is challenging because what we know about Jesus is that he's always raising the standard. He's always raising the standard. And what he's saying in this, he says, even when you do the right thing, that doesn't mean that you do it for the right reasons. You got to pay attention to that. If you do the right thing for the wrong reason, then it is no longer the right thing. Motivation matters. Let me say it this way. Motivation matters to God. If you do the right thing for the wrong reason, then it is no longer the right thing. And so what Jesus is teaching in this, he's saying to guard against it, to guard against the wrong motivation, to make sure that you're not too enamored with public accolade, to make sure that you aren't just doing stuff to draw attention to yourself, to make sure that your act of worship is pure and genuine and acceptable unto God. He says, do it in secret. Do it in secret. Don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Do it in secret. Don't just do it. Do it in secret. Do it where nobody can see. Do it where nobody knows. Do it where you can't get the credit for what you've done. If it's really a value, if it's really important, if you really want to test your motivation, do it in secret. He challenges them with that idea. What happens if I do the right thing and nobody knows about it? Does it matter? Does it still have value to me if I do it and don't get the credit for it? Yeah. Listen, the Lord says, he says, if my eyes are fixed on what other people can't see, then why do you only serve me when people are looking? If I'm paying attention to the things that nobody can see, to the things that nobody knows about, to the things that are hidden, then why do you only serve me when people are watching? If you only serve God when people are watching, listen, then that's not serving. That's called performing. If you only serve God when people are watching, that's called performing. And so it matters. This motivation that can creep in and literally take over your good deeds and literally turn them upside down and cause them to be bad. He says it matters. It matters. So you want to make sure that you guard against it. He continues. Jesus turns his attention to another private devotion concern. He starts talking about prayer, right? Listen to what he says. Verse 5, he says, and when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Let me pause right there, because listen, you know, in my years of ministry experience, I've come to know that it's not uncommon to see people who are like actually afraid to pray like out loud in public in front of people. Like that's a very common thing. You know, maybe they're uncomfortable with the attention, all the eyes on them, or maybe they just don't know what to say. Like maybe they're insecure about their relationship with God, or maybe they're insecure about their relationship with other believers. Like sometimes people get so concerned that they don't measure up to the expectations of others. Maybe they don't sound like other people sound when they pray. And here's the deal. Listen, I can understand that. I get it completely. And so let me just kind of help with it just a little bit. Listen, when it comes to prayer, the power is not in what you say. The power is in what you believe. It's in what you believe. What you believe is all that matters. And so what you do is you simply say what you believe. You are talking to God. You are confessing to him. You're laying it out. You're putting it on the table. You say what you believe. So here's the deal. What do you believe about the situation that you're praying about? Well, what do you believe about those circumstances? What do you believe about your spouse or your children or your coworker or this person who's giving you a hard time? What do you believe about it? And here's the deal. Listen, here's the deal. You don't even have to be right. You just have to be honest. You have to be honest and lay it on the table. Before God, expose your heart before him, right? And here's the deal, because only you can be honest with God about the things that are swirling around in your heart. Only you can do that. This is why your prayers matter, right? This is why they matter, because only you can be revealing and only you can be transparent. Only you can lay it all on the line before God. Listen, so whether you're praying in private or public, that part doesn't matter, because simply you need to know that your prayers matter to God. See, he already knows, but he wants to hear from you. Does that make sense? Now here's the deal, because Jesus is pointing out something very specific, in these few verses here, because he says that, what is more concerning than people who shy away from praying in public are people who shy away from praying in private. He's saying this is more of an issue. He says there is this underlying motivation to be seen by others rather than to be heard by God. And he's saying that this is what's driving people's prayer life. And I'll tell you, that type of religion, it's shiny on the outside, but it is absolutely empty on the inside. And Jesus is exposing this. He's saying, don't be impressed by those people who you see who are in public and they're loud and they're praying a long time and they using big words and they're babbling on and on and on. He's saying none of that matters. He's saying that stuff doesn't necessarily move my heart, or at least it doesn't move it in the way that you think it does. That's not what works with me. Jesus is explaining this to people. He says, so to counter the tendency to do that, he says, when you pray, listen, he says, go into your room and close the door. That way you don't have an audience. That way you don't have an audience. That way it's just you and me talking. You don't have to impress anybody with anything, or you don't have to impress or disappoint anybody. It's just me. And he says, it is your private access to me that will define your public access. There's no need to project intimacy when you can have the real thing. This is what Jesus is teaching here. There's no need to project. There's no need to pretend. Listen, a public demonstration is never a substitute for a private devotion. So he says, go into your closet. Go into your closet where it's just me and you, right? You don't have to try to project or pretend or anything like that. Private devotion, intimacy is what I expect from you. But then Jesus goes even further with this, because he gives an example. He says, here's what my private devotion looks like. Here's what it sounds like. There are no crowds. There are no eyes watching. There's no one to impress or disappoint. He says, it is just me and my Father. And he says, here is what it looks like. And the example is so familiar to us because we know it as the Lord's Prayer. But I need you to see that this is a model of prayer that he's introducing. Let's read verse 9. He says, this then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. Now listen, I'll pause right there, because understand, this is a model prayer. When he shares this, Jesus is not saying, repeat what I say. Let me make that clear. That's not his point. He's saying, relate how I relate. Do you follow that? He wants you to relate in the way that he relates. There is a personal intimacy that shows up in his example. And understand, that does not come by imitation. That comes by cultivation. That comes by cultivation. You must be willing to practice your faith privately. This is why Jesus keeps talking about doing things in secret. You must be willing to practice your faith privately, right? Privately. Listen, I know we've talked about letting your light shine, right? We've talked about being a city on a hill. We've talked about what that means to be light in a dark world. We talked about being a witness to others, like in word and deed. And that stuff is all important. That stuff all brings honor to God. But I need you to understand that some things are for his eyes only. Some things are for his eyes only. Some things God has reserved for himself. So some things are set apart from others, right? So some convictions that you have are not about impressing other people. They're simply about giving God what pleases him. Some things are for his eyes only. And you must learn to reserve some areas of your faith expression to be only between you and the Lord. Hear what I'm saying to you. You have to reserve some areas of your faith expression to be only between you and the Lord. It's too important. It's too important. There are too many temptations. There's too much tendency to allow things to get tainted. To be motivated by what it looks like to impress others or what it looks like to meet this person's expectation. No, some things are meant to be between you and the Lord. You don't owe anybody an explanation. It is for his pleasure. It is for his eyes. It is because he requires it of me. This is what Jesus is talking about. This is what he's talking about. Certainly, ministry is going to have a public aspect to it. Certainly, you're going to serve and you're going to give and it's going to be known and it's going to be made visible to others. But if that is all you do, then sometimes you can lose sight of who you're doing it for. This is the point he's making. So Jesus offers one very common example. Verse 16, he says, when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. He's talking about something as simple as skipping a meal. Something as simple as that. If you skip a meal, nobody would know it unless you told them that you did not eat, right? And I think it's interesting too, because I love how Jesus says, when you fast, right? He doesn't say if you fast. Like there's an assumption that he's making that this is already a regular part of your life. There's an assumption that's there. And see, the way it works, guys, is sometimes people wait to do corporately what God expects of them individually. But I'm telling you that you have to be willing to practice your faith privately. It's what it means to have a personal relationship with the Lord, right? And he says, when you're doing this, when you are practicing your faith privately, as in fasting, something as simple as that, he's saying you don't need to make it public. You don't need to let someone know the sacrifice that you're making. You don't need to give any indication that there's a requirement on you that you're doing something different. If it's meant to be private, then don't make it public. You're going to taint it. He says, don't do that. Some things should just be between you and the Lord. Now let me ask you, let me push. You guys know I like to push. Is there anything in your life that is just between you and the Lord? Something that it's only for him. He's the only one that would know. He's the only one that would see your motivation for doing this. Is there anything that's just between you and the Lord? The only reason you do it is not to impress this person. It's not so that they would know. The only reason you do it is to put a smile on his face. I'm talking to you about personal devotion. He says, the one who sees what is done in secret will reward you. That means it matters to God. It matters to God that there are some things that are reserved for his eyes only. He says that it matters. He says that I matter so much to you that you won't let other people see what you're doing. You won't invite them into this area. This is just me and you. Do you have any place in your life that looks like that? Any sacrifices that you are making that you certainly have the liberty to indulge in, but you just don't. And it's the only reason. It's just for the Lord. I'll tell you, it matters. It matters when we live in a context and in a world where it just means so much to have attention. And I immediately think about social media, and every little thing you do, you're letting the world know that this is what I had for breakfast, and just all of the craziness that comes with that stuff. And it's your whole life is on display to everybody. Is there anything that is just between you and the Lord? Just for his eyes only. I tell you guys, I think that the Lord is not asking us of anything that he doesn't give to us. The reason that we can be intimate with him is because he's willing to be intimate with us. Even his sacrifice on the cross, he says the whole world gets the benefit for it, but I did it just for you. I did it just for you, for your sin. I gave my life up for you. Not that you were in this general crowd of all these people and I do it all at one time. No. I know everybody by name. I know their story. I know their need. I know you. And I gave my life for you. That's an important distinction. To say that he gave his life for us is not the same as saying he gave his life for me. And you need to feel the weight of that. You need to understand the intimacy that is involved in that. I think about the Lord's table, and if you have sacraments, and let me just kind of walk you through, because Jesus is with his disciples and he's explaining to them. He says, take the bread. Listen, this is my body that has been broken for you. They hear that collectively, but it matters for them individually. He's saying, I'm intimate with you. With you. Take it and eat. Likewise, he takes the cup. He says, this cup represents my blood that has been poured out for you. for your sin. I took the punishment for your sin. Take the cup and drink. And he says, as often as you come to this table and you remember, you prove the access that we have. You prove that we can have an intimate relationship. You prove that you take part in me simply by observing my table. It matters. This table shows a personal relationship that you have with me and that I have with you. Let me pray for you. God, thank you so much. Thank you that we do have access. And it's not even that it's this, broad public highway access, dear God. It's personal access. It's intimate. We don't have to wait in line to get to you, sir. You've made a way. You've made a way. And I thank you, Lord, that you teach us, God. You show us how to carve out places in our life where we remember, God, that you've made a way for us personally. We'll certainly share your message with the world, dear God. We'll certainly shine a light for others to see, dear God. We'll certainly love on people who are far away from you, dear God. But I pray, God, that you would help us to remember to reserve a place that is only for you. I thank you, God, that would be evident in our lives for your glory. We love you, sir. We honor you. In Jesus' name, amen.